Kiss my aesthetic, branding, marketing, entrepreneurship.
Greetings and welcome back to the Kiss My Aesthetic podcast. I'm so excited to have Jess on the podcast today. Welcome, Jess.
So much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Amazing. Well, we're going to get into your whole story, but I am just so grateful that we have a PR professional on the call here on the line because I think PR can be a really intimidating industry. But before we get into the industry specifics, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and who you help?
Yeah. So, hi, everyone. I'm Jess Windell, founder and chief maven of Maven Consulting. I run a full funnel PR firm for CPG brands. And I also am a brand founder myself of a sleep wellness brand called Dryft Sleep.
Amazing. How did you even get into all of this stuff? What's your background? What were your interests growing up? Like, did you always have this as a goal or did you kind of stumble into it?
Yeah, I didn't know what PR was when I went to college. No clue. It's never something that you grow up wanting to be. I mean, didn't everyone want to be like a dolphin trainer at SeaWorld, like, or a marine biologist? Like, that's what we're told to be when we grow up. And I actually went to school for broadcast journalism. And so I knew that I loved storytelling, writing, speaking, but I had no idea that this career path really even existed. And so after, some researching and probably some career surveys and tests, I found PR and really knew that it was the difference between being in front of the camera versus behind the camera and really crafting the stories. My first internship was in advertising here in LA, and I just saw firsthand that the brands and companies with the most money got to tell their story the loudest. And I didn't love that. I wanted to tell the stories that needed to be told and stories that I got excited about versus just slapping, a creative on a billboard and calling it a day. So I got really excited about this career path, started my career in an agency, traditional PR agency for 7 years and helped build that from the ground up before going in-house for a brand, Perfect Bar, in 2014, and was with that brand during a rocket ship timeframe where we grew, from startup mode to 1 year post acquisition to Mondelez. So it was a very high growth, rapid timeframe, and just really taught me a lot from the opposite side of how to be in a brand and watch everything cross functionally from a PR standpoint versus standing pretty far away and having an arm's distance on the agency side. So when that acquisition happened and it was the middle of the pandemic and everything was changing, I just had to have a hard look at what my options were. And I knew that I wasn't ready to go back into a company that I was going to kind of have to just repeat the same story with. I really thought that there was a white space in the PR world for CPG brands specifically, that there was just something missing in terms of what was connecting PR with marketing. And the two seemed to be very siloed to me and everything that I was seeing and experiencing. And I had the luxury of being inside of a brand that I got to work with outside resources, but also build an in-house team. And I just saw how lucrative that was to a growing brand to be in the weeds of it with a PR lens. So I started Maven in almost 4 years ago to the date, 2020, and really have just helped brands ever since really bridge the gap between their PR and marketing efforts while still leaning really heavily into the PR side of things, which is that top of funnel brand awareness, perception changing, trust, loyalty, all these emotional connections that you have with the brand that marketing doesn't necessarily hit the mark on.
We've covered so much and we're going to cover so much deep dive of this. But the first thing I want to ask you more to elaborate on is the idea of telling story. So break it down for us in the most simple way. What does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis of being a PR professional and getting that story out to the masses? Because I think a lot of people conflate social media with PR or like outreach or press mentions as PR, but it's so much bigger than that. Like you talked about brand perception, you talked about awareness, storytelling. Where does that kind of fit in? Or when you were thinking of those early years being in-house with Perfect Bar, what were some of the roles and responsibilities that you were in charge of as like the in-house PR girl?
It's such a fantastic question because the reason I do these types of interviews is to demystify PR. Like I said, I went into college not knowing what PR was, and now it's my life's work. And still, my parents don't know what I do and can't explain it. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of just getting really obvious with what the role is. And I think that also helps brands, marketers,
Mm-hmm.
individuals who have a story to tell or something to promote to understand why I need it, when I need it, and what does it look like. So I really appreciate just like breaking it down
Yeah, let's go for it.
to the basics. And there's this really cheesy model that I love. That's this visual I'll send to you after this. It's called the peso model. Have you heard of it?
Uh-uh.
Okay, so it's basically a Venn diagram and it's four circles and it paid media, owned media, shared media, and earned media. And there's crossover in each of the Venn diagrams as there is in a Venn diagram. And in the middle of all four, the culmination of all four of those channels is reputation, trust, and basically the longevity of like your brand perception. So why I love that is because yes, PR is a function to get that reputation, but it's not the only thing that matters. You have
Mm-hmm.
to have these other channels firing on all cylinders to build that reputation. PR just happens to be a very strong conduit of that because it's earned, it's shared, it's endorsements, it's inherently trust building because what's the difference between you walking down the street and seeing on a light post a poster that says, come into this house down the street. They're playing the best music, they're serving the best drinks, and there's really cool people there. It is a self-promoted flyer that says, come on in, the water's fine, come check it out. Versus your friend standing on that corner, running into them and being like, where are you going? Oh my gosh, I'm going to this house down the street. They are playing the best music, they're serving the best drinks, and like all the best people are there. What's going to entice you to go into that house quicker, right? It's that endorsement. So inherently, PR on at its most basic level is you getting the same marketing message that a brand wants to tell you from someone you trust, someone,
Mm-hmm.
something, an entity that you trust, which is why PR has evolved so much over the years because originally it was very traditional magazines, broadcast, radio. That is where we were getting those endorsements on a mass scale. You trust the editor of Women's Health. You trust your local DJ on the radio station. You trust Hoda on the Today Show. That was pretty much it. As this digital revolution has evolved, these platforms and channels have grown so much, which makes it more accessible to reach these people, right? These stakeholders that you need to have as endorsements, but it also creates just this insanely overwhelming opportunity to like be everywhere to everything and everyone. And with podcasts, with influencers, I mean, it's just excessive at this point of where those endorsements can come from. But on its most basic level, our job as publicists is to take a story, take a message, serve it up so well to someone who has influence on our audience that they want to tell that story for us and in a way that is effective and adequately conveys exactly what we want that end consumer to know without us as the brand having to tell them. So I often say that publicists are really like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, kind of like, okay, like say this, say this, say this. And then we just sit back and cross our fingers and hope that
Uh-huh.
that is what is said.
Uh-huh.
Does that help
Totally. No, that definitely helps to cover
convey?
it because I think you made such a good point. It's relationship based. So it's about building and forging those relationships and following through. I think that's where a lot of people fall short is they say, "Oh, I have all these connections, all these connections, all these connections." But if you're pitching, there takes a certain level of like discernment there too, right? Like you need to make sure that you believe your pitch, that you
Oh
believe in the
my
brands that
gosh,
you're working with, that you're
absolutely.
aligned with their mission and vision and goals and message because as soon as you start burning a bridge, you're shooting yourself in the foot in PR way more than just a creative professional that's creating social media posts or building a brand like I do, like with the visuals. It's like, okay, we built it, like here you go, and then I kind of pass it off. But I've got to imagine with PR there's so much pressure to maintain and deliver on a lot of those relationships. Did you find that hard in the beginning?
Both.
Yeah.
It's both relationships. It's navigating the client needs,
Yeah.
expectations, and wants. And then also, how are we a good partner for our stakeholders? So I used to say for media, but now there are so many other
True.
stakeholders that we need to consider. And I even think stakeholders, this is a whole nother topic, but when we think about PR, I consider a stakeholder anybody who has a vested interest in your business and
Mm.
has influence on your end consumer. So your employees are
Yeah.
a stakeholder that need to be considered in your PR strategy, because they're out at a networking event talking about your company to industry professionals, or they're on a panel talking about their role in marketing. And that is now telling the audience what they should think about your company culture and how you treat your employees, and what are we equipping that employee of ours with to tell the best story that's going to give off a good representation of our business. I mean, the amount of stakeholders that need to be considered. We do a stakeholder mapping exercise with our clients.
Cool.
It's relationships with all of them, not just the media. But from a agency standpoint, we have to make sure that we're making everyone happy. And that is a very difficult thing to do when everyone is looking out for their own best interest. So if we have a really juicy story that we're giving an exclusive to Forbes to, and then our client says, you know what, actually, we're not going to announce it anymore. And we're like, we just did the interview. The article's
Mm-hmm.
publishing tomorrow. They've already gotten it signed off by their team. We can't go back to them and say, sorry, you can't run the story. Our client changed their mind. Now our reputation and our relationship is tarnished. And sometimes we have to just put our hands up. We can't do
Yeah.
anything. So it is a lot to navigate. Both my parents are therapists, and everyone asked me, oh,
Okay.
did you ever want to become a therapist? And I was
You're
like,
like, I
I'm a
do
business
therapy every day.
therapist. It's a
Yeah.
relationship, it's communication, it's being able to navigate the psychology of the way people work and self-awareness and just consideration. There's so much that goes into it, but you're exactly right. It's the relationship first and foremost. And truly, if you don't have a good relationship, you think even if you have a great story, I mean, it goes both ways. Sometimes
Right.
you have an incredible story and no relationship and it works.
Right.
Or you have an incredible relationship and no story and it still works because
Still
you have
works.
the relationship. Sometimes neither work, right? You can't break through the clutter of email inboxes and you don't get heard. Or you have a really great relationship. You've worked with this editor for years and years and years, and you really feel like this is a good story for them. And they're like, I'm sorry, I don't have the capacity, or I'm covering something else right now. That relationship literally doesn't matter. So it's also a game of news cycle. We're in this insane political climate right now. We just had an internal team meeting the other day about how are we going to navigate the next 4 months, just knowing what we know, and we have no political conversations to have, right? Even with the Olympics going on right now, it's like being really realistic about where you have room to show up and how you can best serve your client, yes, but your relationship second. So if we know that that's what the news cycle is going to be absorbed with, we're not going to come with some silly, frilly thing on November 4th. Like we have to know better.
Of
And that's
course.
relationship based.
Of course. And I tell my team this all the time as well. We do social media management on behalf of some of our brands, and we're always looking a month, 2 months ahead. Like, okay, what are the things that are for sure going to happen that we know we can calendar for, that we want to breathe around or contribute to? And then where's the room where we can wiggle if we have to, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's having that big picture visibility is something that I think a lot of small business owners lack. So as you made the transition out of Perfect Bar into getting your own clients with Maven, how do you feel like, because if I had to guess, because I'm in a similar position to you, the clients that we're working with are like, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know how to do any of this. Ugh, help me, right? And so that we can get them to a certain point, but then there's kind of this place of like, okay, where's your next move here? And for us, our kind of the top of our ceiling ends up kind of being PR, because we can have great organic social and the most amazing product and beautiful images and beautiful graphics, but it's like we need people to talk about your brand. Like we need people to talk about it, post about it, want to be part of it, all of that. So when you're working with clients in a small business capacity, maybe we can think early years Maven 2020, right? What were you finding that those first few clients were struggling with the most? Like where were they the most stuck?
How much time do you have?
Yeah. Right?
No, one of my absolute favorite functions of what we get to do is diagnose. And my agency is called Maven Consulting, and I have gone back and forth over the years of like, do I call it Maven PR because sometimes that's just what people call us, or do I call it Maven Communications, or do I just go straight Maven? And I've decided that I want to stay a consultancy because to me, it helps to convey what we actually do. I believe that instead of us going in with a proposal that's super cookie cutter and says we kind of do the same thing for everyone, before we even start working with a brand, we have diagnosed what the opportunity is, what the objectives are for the brand, and how our expertise and experience can best serve them with that knowing. And so I believe that while there is a lot going on, we're so, especially now it's been 4 years, the early stages, I mean, gosh, I was doing everything and anything. I was over delivering. I mean, we're still over delivering, but like,
Yes, but
just
you
like
like end up
we had
taking,
no ceiling. And especially
yes,
because I was coming from a
yes.
marketing team, I know how to do
Uh-huh.
everything. Doesn't mean I should. And
Uh-huh.
so I will say that it's about getting super pointed about priorities because
Right.
there will forever be opportunities hitting you in the face everywhere you look, but you have to prioritize what needs to happen first, second, and third. I literally just had a call this morning with a brand that I'm very excited about that I got introduced to. And I said to her, I want to work with you. However, I think that we should table this conversation for at least a month, if not more, because it sounds like you're still trying to get your marketing plans dialed. Hires, agencies, this is your first foray into this. I would rather you have a solid foundation of what you're doing on the marketing side, then we get to come in and amplify it and add to it versus, and I said, and I just want to caution you from talking to other PR agencies. And if they try and bring you on right now, I would just put them on the back burner. And like, I have no problem with you talking with do what you got to do.
Right.
But my advice would be to hold off until you prioritize that because that will allow us to do our job so much better. So I think it's easy for us to get overwhelmed with opportunity as well. But I think what I've learned is prioritizing, like, how do we build a plan and look ahead to say, okay, first 3 months, let's do this. Then we'll tackle this. Then we'll tackle this. Right now, we're getting together with all of our brands to do 2025 planning before October 1st, because I really believe that we need to be looking that far out. And
Totally.
it allows us to just right size the work we're doing now so we don't feel like we're under delivering or we're not doing everything we can do because we're like, oh, no, that's coming down the pipeline. Don't worry.
That was one of the biggest shifts in our agency as well, is working with clients on that like 6-month visibility, 6 months to a year visibility of, okay, we know what we're doing now. We've got it dialed in, but there is kind of this natural order to things. Like having the idea for your holiday campaign should be happening in May, like, and then be created in June and then being ordered in July so you can shoot in September to have assets to roll in November. Like that is a huge work back schedule. And it's been something that once we've addressed that with our clients and been able to roll with it, it's so many less fire drills of like, oh my God, we need to come up with a holiday promotion right now. It's like, we
It's
can't,
so reactive.
this is silly. Like this, there's no need
and it ends up
to
not
be this
being
crazy.
well done. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But PR can also move, like you said, it can move at the speed of light. So what helps, especially for like the marketing managers out there or freelancers or people in PR or marketing in general, is like when you do have that plan and you have created kind of the backlog, you have so much more agility when something crazy comes up than you do if you got nothing.
Sister.
If you are trying to scramble and be like, oh my God, it's Olympics opening ceremonies today. What do we post? It's like, you knew 4 years ago that the Olympics was happening today. Like, what are you talking about? You're just trying to come up with your content. Like, that's the kind of thing. It's like, but you have to, I think, to be a good creative and be a good marketer, you've got to be plugged in. You've got to be paying attention. Where do you go to find like information, industry news, happenings? Like, where are you staying up to date with stuff?
It's such a great next conversation to have because part of the lure and excitement of PR is newsjacking, of hopping on a trend as soon as it comes up, because the whole basis of PR is being part of the conversation that's happening, inserting yourself and finding a way to be relevant. I say that there's 3 things that we need in order to go out with a pitch. Relevancy, meaning why is this even part of the conversation versus you're trying to force something to be part of the conversation. Number 2 is timeliness. Why now? What's a sense of urgency? I think 3 times this week we had campaigns that we were talking about going out with. And I was like, I don't see the urgency. We got to find it. So like we have the story. And then the third is significance. Why us? Why are we the ones that get to tell the story versus someone else? It's so simple, but honestly grounds us so much because I think I have a great story every day for our clients. I'm obsessed with our clients. And
Mm-hmm.
I just think, the world of what we have to share, but unless we can show up, right, in a way that is the most appropriate for our media contacts or stakeholders, we shouldn't be talking to them. We should wait until we have that fully baked story. So that is hard to contrive far out.
Sure.
A lot of times we're trying to come up with these campaigns and stunts that are newsworthy and buzzworthy, but we don't know what the news climate's going to be at that point. So we can plan out for like dry January in January and come up with a marketing campaign that we think will get a little bit of attention, but what really works is something hits the news cycle and we see it. And then we say, oh my gosh, Rationale
Here's our
Brewing is
shot.
perfect for this. They're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, moderation. They're talking about limiting alcohol or the effects of alcohol, or, it's back to school, which again, that can be planned. But things that happen that we have to be on, I say our biggest benefit to our brands is that we're the eyes and ears of what's happening outside of the four walls of their business while they are so focused on what's happening within those four walls. So with owned media, social, you get to be you still have to be looking around and seeing, actually, that's not true. I'm going to take that back. You absolutely have to be seeing what's trending and what's
Yeah.
happening to be able to jump on.
Oh, yeah.
But you can also kind of bake in some of those things like you're saying with the Olympics. So where do I go to find trends? We are avid readers of newsletters, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
We are signed up for Substack, industry newsletters, media newsletters, everything that's going out, and we kind of clump them together and, one fell swoop a day and then try and go back and read them. But we're constantly sharing in our Slack channels. I would say LinkedIn is a really great place, TikTok, social, like we have to be on the pulse. And I think we all spread our wings far and wide in our different channels and kind of own different channels. But it really is just following these people who are kind of first to the scene on the news or the trends so that we can be second on the scene, right? Like we're not necessarily sourcing the news as much as we are making sure that we're surveying everything that's happening and seeing what's going to hit for our brands.
Yeah, you're paying attention to all the players on the field. You're like, even if I'm not playing this game, I'm still going to watch what everybody else is doing.
Yep.
And I'm going to watch the tapes and I'm going to review because there
Love
may be a
that.
lesson to be learned, right? Like we just did this with one of our clients. Our whole team had like an all hands meeting. We're planning social for their rollout and launch. And it's like, okay, let's think every industry that we can think of that this consumer also buys. What are they doing? What kind of, this person, the example here is Lily Parts, like a women's golf, tennis, and pickleball boutique opening in La Jolla. It's like, okay, what makeup does she wear? What shoes does she have? What car does she drive? What and it sounds so simple of like ideal client avatar, but it's like we need to exist in this. It's like, okay, it's somewhere between Sporty and Rich and Hill House. Like we got to kind of find the middle ground. And it's like, okay, someone would pull up an example like, what about this one? I'm like, okay, yes to these elements, but no to these elements. But when you have that like big picture visibility, it becomes much easier to find not only where your story is, but also where your alliances could be. Who could we partner with?
Adjacent. It's such a great point. We do a competitive landscape analysis in our first month of working with our brands, and we ask for their competitors in their set or their category, and then we ask for 5 or so brands that they really admire or think that their consumer is also a mega fan of. And that is, while we have 2 different use cases for those findings. The first is, what are these brands getting covered for and how are they positioning themselves in the media landscape? And then how can we separate and elevate our brand to be nothing like that?
Different. Exactly.
But the other is, what can we learn from the way that these brands are showing up and how they're showing up, and kind of like get into that same pool with them so that we're thinking like outside of our category. Because especially when I was at Perfect Bar, it's 2015, CPG is not cool yet. It really isn't. And it's almost 10 years ago, and brands were not doing collaborations. They were not, Erewhon didn't exist, I don't think. And like these things weren't happening yet. And so we actually looked to the beauty industry versus CPG for our influence.
Yeah.
And we were like, how are our beauty brands working with influencers? How are they hosting events? What are they doing for their media mailers? That's what we need to do. And we did it. And I'm so proud of what we were able to do at perfect bar in the early days of influencer marketing. And it's because we didn't look next to us. We looked like far beyond us.
And it opens more doors for more possibilities because then you can partner with those brands, learn from them, take advantage of their audience. There's just like so many stepping stones from breaking out of like trying to like zero in on just your competitors. I think that gets people really short-sighted and they get really distracted and they get really in the weeds. And it's like, let's broaden the horizons a little bit here. Like some of the craziest ones are, I mean, there's kind of, my team was joking about this morning. There are those kind of like forbidden collabs that probably shouldn't exist, like Native, the body wash with Girl Scout cookies. Like, I don't know who was like, this is a green light.
Is that real?
Oh yeah, it's at Target. Like you can smell like a Thin Mint or a Smo cookie.
I can't.
That to me is odd. There's a few other ones, but we were just kind of talking about like the cursed collab.
Sure.
But there's so many fun things to be had as well. So as you're approaching this now with your own brand, with Dryft Sleep, let's talk about Dryft Sleep. Who are you paying attention to? What brands have you excited that you're kind of like, oh, okay, like I could see us occupying a little bit of their playground?
Great question. Yeah. So Dryft Sleep is a 2-year-old brand. And I have a business partner, Lindsay, who we both had our own respective PR and marketing consultancies and just kind of joined together as like colleagues who really respected each other's opinions about our own businesses, had this idea for mouth tape, which is what it looks
nice.
Mouth tape to support nasal breathing while you sleep. And so it was a very obscure product that did not exist in like the lifestyle beauty realm. It was much more clinical and really only lived in this biohacker space. And so we saw an opportunity to basically build a brand around this product that then has since transformed into more of a sleep wellness portfolio. So we're building a portfolio of sleep consumables. So things that you use within the 30 minutes right before you go into bed. So anything that's on your nightstand, essentially. But it's kind of goes back to the perfect bar model where we were looking at beauty brands as that influence because everything was so clinical and we saw the wellness opportunity and the wellness craze happening on TikTok and Instagram and just everyone adopting these kind of more obscure tactics to get better sleep or to wake up looking their best and feeling their best. And so I would absolutely say that it's like beauty brands that we looked at. Even, I mean, again, I would not go to traditional CPG food and bev as our influence for Dryft. We wanted to just elevate the sleep time experience. And instead of making it something where, you know, you're dreading kind of like, oh, getting into bed, having to fall asleep, it's like this ritual that you're looking forward to, and that you get to kind of decide, what do I need tonight? Like some nights I do take melatonin or I'll do a sleepy tea, but other nights I'm like, I am tired. I don't need it tonight. I have mouth tape every single night because it's completely changed my life. And when I don't do it, I wake up feeling so groggy.
Interesting.
I'm just like pissed at myself for not just finding it. Or if I'm like, especially when I'm traveling, I'm like, I don't know where it is. Like, where did I put it? I'm so tired. But same thing with an eye mask. So it's like something I really look forward to. It turns my brain off. And I think that similar to a skincare routine, also something that you kind of dread. You're like, oh, I don't want to do it. But then once you've done it, you're like, oh, then you kind of start looking forward to it. Same thing with a morning routine. Any sort of like ritualistic tendency that you have, we've been trying to create that with Dryft in this like sleep time moment. So yeah, I would say beauty, lifestyle, those types of categories. And then, I mean, we don't necessarily think sleep brands are doing that much right now. We're not in the durables like sheets or pajamas or trackables, wearables. So we, again, when you're saying adjacent alignment, that's who we're looking to align with and build with and collaborate with, because we will never produce those products, but we certainly go hand in hand with them.
But also, like, talk about an industry that's had a total revamp in the last few years. Like, how many cool mattress brands are there now that didn't exist? Like Purple, Casper, Avocado. Like, there's now so many of them, which is wild. So I think that's such a smart approach, because when you were describing this, like, no one's really cornered the nighttime routine market. Like, coffee has such a vice grip on the morning. Like, how long have we been marketed to about even like cereal in the morning or your bowl of Wheaties or
Yeah,
Cheerios?
yeah,
There's such a brand allegiance in that like first few hours of the day. It's crazy that we don't have that as much at the
absolutely.
end of the day.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. Very, very
Mhm.
interesting. I have tried sleeping with mouth tape now a few nights in a row. And yesterday I woke up with it like stuck on the side of my
I
thigh
know.
and I didn't notice until like 4 p.m. And I was like,
Oh,
oh, this is
isn't
great.
that the funniest? I'm a pretty heavy sleeper and I don't move around a lot, so that's why I think it works
Yeah.
so well for me and it never falls off. But I was camping and I'm literally hiking at 3 p.m. that day, and my friend goes, "What is on
What
the
is
back
on
of
your
your
arm?
arm?" And just mouth tape sticking there. I'm like, par for the course.
Nice.
If you, are
Nice.
you a founder? Or are you a founder if your product's not
Honestly,
all over you?
that could be a whole campaign in and of itself. It's
Like,
like, where did you
where's your
find
mouth
your mouth
tape?
tape?
Yeah.
Because that is so fun. Like, I literally was the same thing. I was like, what the heck is on me? And then I was like, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
Wow, super exciting with Dryft. That's very cool. So
Thank
I've got
you.
to imagine, because your PR partnerships, you're also going to be going the influencer route a little bit and trying to kind of meddle within there. A lot of people are, I've noticed, a little bit turned off by the influencer industry or
Mm,
overwhelmed by the people with
mm,
the mega millions of followers or the like high hundreds and hundreds of K followers. And also that brands get increasingly frustrated with the lack of
of course.
conversion, of course. So it's like setting the
Mhm.
expectation right. How are you approaching that? And how are you helping your clients approach the range of creators that you work with?
My goodness.
You've got like nano, micro, like mega influencers. There's such a huge spectrum. When we were helping with the San Diego Open, the tennis tournament, I
Mm.
was that had zero budget for
Wait,
any
we
of
were
this stuff.
there.
Yeah,
Drift was there.
I
Yeah.
think we must have crossed paths. So I was
Yeah.
doing all the branding for San Diego Open for the last 3 years.
Okay.
And then our team
Then
did all the
with
social.
Natalie,
Yes, 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 yes.
amazing. Yes.
So, and Natalie and I are still like this.
Yes. I
We're
love
working
her.
on now another project. But yes, San Diego Open was great, but they had zero budget. So for me, I'm like, we need to
Yeah.
find the people with 2 or 3,000 followers that they don't get a lot of brand opportunities, and you need to
Mhm.
be in as one of the first brands
Mhm.
that hit them up and said, "Hey, come create content for us." And we did with some people, but it was one of those things that was really hard to sell that client specifically on the idea and the impact of a local in your backyard kind of event
I
for
know.
a local influencer, which to me, being someone in marketing, I was like, this is a no-brainer.
Of course.
A
Of course.
no-brainer. So how do you help explain that? Let's say you sign a client that's like, yeah, we've never done anything influencer ever.
It
How do
is
you even start to have the
such a
conversation?
loaded question. I think
Yeah.
we could probably have an entire episode just on that, because the fact of the matter is, because of our PR background, I believe that influencer marketing is 100% a under the umbrella of PR for
Yeah.
3 reasons. How I discern what is or isn't PR is basically 3 things. One, is there a relationship? You do not need to have a relationship with Mark Zuckerberg,
Yeah.
Mark
Same.
Zuckerberg to put an ad on Facebook.
Sure.
Nor do you need to have a relationship with the business that the billboard is above on Sunset Avenue. You need a relationship in order for that's like number one. Number two is that storytelling component, that why are you showing up here? What do you have to say that is really going to resonate with this audience? Because again, you can throw up an ad that nobody is checking and it does not land, and no one is
Mhm.
going to fault you for it. It just comes and goes and it performs or it doesn't. The third is editorial integrity. So somebody needing to review it prior to it going up. That like process to me is
Mhm.
required, so that even press releases have gotten really bad with what brands can put out. And I have clients of ours that edit our press release as if it's an article that they wrote that's highly subjective, like groundbreaking news, the most
Yep.
innovative product. And
Yep.
I say we need to act with editorial integrity, because when this does go to be published and it's seen as a news announcement and it's super fluffy and it reads like a blog post, no one's going to believe it. We're going to be
No.
the boy who cried wolf. So with influencers, I feel similarly in that it's a function of PR by nature of the relationship, the storytelling, and the editorial integrity. Why it's still so valuable is because endorsement by an influencer likely won't happen if they despise your product.
Of
There
course.
has to
Well,
be
you'd hope
some
so,
level.
right? You'd hope that they have some level of discerning,
And I think for
they're
the
not taking
most
every deal
part,
that knocks on their door.
even if they do, though, they have to be willing to stand by it to
Yeah.
some capacity. I mean, the good ones, right? Like I'd say
Yeah.
80% of influencers will at least say, yeah, I like this product. Generally, I like this brand. Do they do the due diligence they need to do to really stand behind it? Oftentimes not. So I approach it in that way of we are very discerning with who we work with, but we also really get clear on what are the objectives here. Because to your point, the education piece for brands that just want to do a nano influencer seeding and then expect a big
Crazy
return from
return.
that versus we are now top of mind for these people who are talking to our target audience. We might just be in their fridge when they open it and are, making their morning breakfast. That's a win. They don't need to post about it the second they get it. Our PR box wasn't that cool. So like it didn't really warrant a story. But if we are starting to show up in their day-to-day lives and that happens to get covered and people start seeing it, that's a win. So really getting clear about what is the objective here. If conversions are the objective, I think affiliate is a great
Yeah.
tool, but it's also not for everyone. It's also
Right.
very transactional. And so for Dryft, I mean, we've gone about it so scrappy because we are very bootstrapped. And also, I'm not trying to spend a ton if I
No.
can't see the ROI. So, what we've done over the last 2 years is we've built up kind of an army of 250 experts, influencers, and advocates that we think are really stoked on the idea of mouth tape or kind of sleep hacking. And we've asked nothing of them. We have not
Yeah.
asked for a
Smart.
post. We've gotten some content created, which we've paid for, which I firmly believe in paying for. I don't think you should
Of
ever
course.
expect someone to create content for you just out of the goodness of their heart that you can then use. But we are just now starting to activate those who have been with us for a while. We do have affiliate setups and we give them the tools and resources that they need to promote our product in a way that we are excited about. So we've created Instagram story templates for them. We've done creative briefs, messaging guides, like given them tons of examples of how they can create content to make their lives easier and make the ability to tell our story as simple and straightforward as possible so that they have to do as little work as possible. And so we have yet to pay a single influencer for content for Dryft. And we've been really lucky that people just, and that's the thing is if you have a good
If
product
you
and you
have a
have,
good product, you got to start with that, of course.
and something worth talking about,
Mm-hmm.
I say it's a product worth selling and a story worth telling because it's not just about like, I mean, my coffee and my creamer that I had today, you can't see it right here,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I'm
Mm-hmm.
drinking this in my Instagram story or even on the podcast, right? If I'm literally holding my canned coffee ready to drink, you know exactly what I'm drinking.
Mm-hmm.
But it would require me, and I am actually really obsessed with, I drink chameleon cold brew and I've tried others and I can't get past it. If you ask me, so Jess, like what coffee do you drink in the morning? I'd be like, oh my gosh, the only coffee I can drink is chameleon cold brew because it's so potent. I love the flavor. It's not bitter. It doesn't require that much cream. Like I would boast about it. It
Totally.
requires, though, that boastability. And
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
how can we equip influencers with like the urge to talk about it? Not
Yep.
just the incentive, which is like, what am I getting for this? They have inherent value of sharing with their audience because that's what they are there to do. But you have to give them a reason to talk about it. So when you say, like, did you know that when you breathe through your mouth, you do not get nitric oxide to your bloodstream because your nose filters air differently than your mouth does? And nitric oxide oxidizes your bloodstream and infuses energy into your circulation, your bloodstream, that when you wake up, you have infinitely more energy than you do if you breathe through your mouth. Mind blown. Oh
There
my
you
gosh.
go.
I need to
There's the
tell
story.
everyone I know about
Yeah,
that.
I'm locked in. I mean, this is perfect. This is our tagline for our brand design agency is building brag-worthy brands. Like we want to
Love
make
it.
a brand that's so beautiful and so cool and so exciting that people cannot stop talking about it. And I don't need it to be an influencer. I need it to be your neighbor. I need it to be your boyfriend or girlfriend or your
Right.
aunt and uncle. Like make something that somebody is so excited about that they can't stop talking about it. And that's
Right.
essentially PR. It's like we want to make brands that people want to want to make PR about, that they want to share about.
Totally.
I think it's a really fun industry to be in. It definitely has its pros and cons for sure. But very exciting. So where can everyone find you, follow you, get some mouth tape? Because now I want to try your brand. I've like did the Amazon dupe,
Oh my
like
gosh, no,
little,
I will
I
absolutely
need to try
send you
some for
some.
sure. For sure.
It is so much better. It is medical grade. I
Amazing.
mean, I care way too much about my lips to
Yep.
be putting some
Scotch tape
tacky
bullshit.
tape on
Yeah.
it. Not gonna fly every single night. So probably LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me. I do post a lot of just like tips and tricks on there. So just Jess Windell on LinkedIn, and then on Instagram it's Maven_consulting and just Dryft Sleep. And
Sorry.
yeah, all the good stuff is there.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, you guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share, tag us. We'd love to see it. Try Dryft Sleep. Check out Maven Consulting. And thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.
See ya. Bye.